For decades, the public narrative surrounding the retirement of the SR-71 Blackbird has been accepted as absolute historical fact, repeated across aviation documentaries, military history books, and official government press releases. The story was simple, logical, and seemingly airtight. The aircraft was a Cold War relic, an incredibly expensive engineering marvel that had simply outlived its economic and operational utility in a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape. According to the official documentation, the operational costs of maintaining a fleet of specialized titanium aircraft, which required a massive logistics train, unique liquid nitrogen insulated fuel tanks, dedicated tanker support fleets, and highly specialized pilot training programs, had become entirely unsustainable. We were told that the advent of highly sophisticated spy satellites had rendered high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft obsolete, providing a safer, cheaper, and more persistent eye in the sky, without risking American lives or violating international airspace. This narrative served its purpose perfectly, offering a clean, financially responsible explanation that satisfied congressional budget committees and the general public alike. However, when one applies a rigorous analytical framework to the timeline of the Blackbird's decommissioning, the official explanation begins to fracture under the weight of its own logical contradictions, revealing a complex web of strategic misdirection designed to obscure a much larger evolutionary leap in aerospace capabilities. To understand the true catalyst behind the grounding of the world's fastest air-breathing aircraft, one must first dismantle the economic argument that has been used as a shield for over a quarter of a century. The United States military budget during the late 1980s and throughout the 1990s was undergoing a massive structural reallocation following the collapse of the Soviet Union, a period often referred to as the peace dividend. During this era, numerous legacy programs were scrutinized, downsized, or canceled entirely. Yet the argument that the SR-71 was eliminated purely to save a few $100 million annually falls apart when compared to the astronomical sums being funneled into contemporary black budget programs that received virtually no public oversight. The Blackbird fleet did not operate in a financial vacuum. Its funding was a drop in the ocean compared to the overall intelligence and defense apparatus. Furthermore, the strategic value of real-time, survivable, responsive overhead reconnaissance is something that cannot be easily quantified on a standard corporate balance sheet. In times of international crisis, having an asset that can penetrate deeply contested airspace within hours' notice, dynamic task its onboard sensors to capture high-resolution imagery or signals intelligence, and return safely to base is a capability that commanders do not willingly surrender simply because of high hourly operational costs. The decision to retire such a capability permanently suggests that the capability was not actually being lost, but rather transitioned to a platform that offered superior strategic advantages under a cloak of total deniability. The technological landscape of the late 20th century provides critical clues as to why the official narrative was constructed. The SR-71 was a masterpiece of 1960s analog engineering, designed using slide rules and wind tunnels long before the advent of modern computational fluid dynamics or advanced composite materials. It relied entirely on brute force, utilizing massive Pratt & Whitney J58 turbojet engines to achieve sustained flight at Mach 3.2, relying on its speed and extreme altitude as its primary mechanisms of survival. If a surface-to-air missile was launched at a Blackbird, the standard operating procedure was simply to accelerate and climb, leaving the interceptor weapon to burn through its fuel energy in the thin upper atmosphere long before it could reach the target. This strategy was flawlessly effective throughout the Vietnam War and the height of the Cold War, with over 4,000 missiles fired at the aircraft over its operational lifetime, and not a single one ever making contact. However, by the dawn of the 1990s, the fundamental equation of aerial warfare was undergoing a paradigm shift. Soviet air defense systems, specifically the development of the S-300 and the conceptualization of the S-400 series, along with advanced interceptors like the MiG-31 equipped with long-range digital radar systems, were rapidly closing the technological gap. Speed alone was no longer an absolute guarantee of invulnerability. The thermal signature generated by an aircraft traveling at over 2,000 miles per hour was immense, lighting up infrared sensors across the globe like a beacon against the cold backdrop of space, making the Blackbird incredibly easy to detect, track, and predict, even if it remained difficult to hit. This vulnerability highlighted a deeper structural flaw in the reliance on legacy high-altitude platforms. While the SR-71 could outrun contemporary threats, the geopolitical cost of operating a highly visible, unstealthy reconnaissance asset was escalating. Every flight required immense diplomatic coordination, specialized fuel staging across global forward operating bases, and a massive footprint that was impossible to conceal from foreign intelligence agencies. The moment an SR-71 started its engines at Beale Air Force Base or Mildenhall, the entire world knew it was airborne. This lack of operational surprise severely limited its effectiveness in a post-Cold War environment where conflicts were becoming asymmetric, localized, and highly fluid. The Pentagon did not need a loud, hot, highly visible Titan that signaled its arrival hours in advance. It required a ghost. It needed a platform that could loiter over an area of interest undetected for extended periods, gathering intelligence without triggering diplomatic incidents or alerting the target below. The emergence of stealth technology, pioneered by the F-117 Nighthawk and the B-2 Spirit, demonstrated that low observability was far more valuable than raw velocity in modern conflict zones. A slow, stealthy asset could accomplish what a fast, loud asset could not: persistent, unalerted surveillance. The insistence by official channels that satellite constellations had fully replaced the Blackbird is another pillar of the historical narrative that crumbles under professional scrutiny. While orbital reconnaissance assets are incredibly powerful, they are governed by the unyielding laws of orbital mechanics. A spy satellite moves along a predictable, mathematically fixed path around the Earth. Foreign adversaries tracking these orbits know precisely when a specific satellite will pass overhead and exactly how long its window of observation will last. This allows them to easily implement denial and deception tactics, moving sensitive equipment indoors, covering assets, or halting operations during the orbital pass window. Furthermore, changing a satellite's orbit to respond to a sudden, unpredictable geopolitical crisis consumes valuable onboard fuel, drastically shortening the operational lifespan of a multi-billion-dollar space asset. Satellites also suffer from atmospheric interference, weather limitations, and a lack of flexible, multi-angle sensor positioning that an atmospheric aircraft can easily provide. To suggest that the defense establishment willingly chose to rely solely on predictable space-based imagery while completely abandoning an atmospheric reconnaissance capability is an insult to strategic military planning. The logical conclusion is that an atmospheric gap never existed. Rather, the atmospheric mission shifted from a highly publicized, iconic aircraft to a clandestine fleet of advanced, unacknowledged platforms. The bureaucratic theater surrounding the retirement of the SR-71 further exposes the internal rifts and misdirections within the defense establishment. In the mid-1990s, a fascinating political struggle occurred when Congress, recognizing the unique capabilities of the aircraft, bucked the wishes of the Air Force leadership and forced the reactivation of a small number of Blackbirds. The Air Force fought this reactivation tooth and nail, arguing that the funding could be better spent elsewhere. This public resistance was highly unusual for a military branch, typically eager to retain prestigious, high-profile assets. The fierce opposition from the Pentagon elite suggests that the continued public operation of the SR-71 was actively interfering with or drawing unwanted attention to the development and deployment of the actual highly classified systems designed to replace it. By keeping the Blackbird retired, the defense establishment could effectively close the book on high-altitude, high-speed atmospheric reconnaissance in the public eye, creating a convenient blind spot that allowed next-generation technologies to operate globally without public or congressional scrutiny. The narrative of economic retirement was not just an explanation. It was a masterclass in strategic ambiguity, allowing the evolution of aerospace dominance to continue unabated, far beyond the reach of public knowledge or adversarial counterstrategies. To truly uncover the architecture of this decades-long misdirection, one must look directly into the deep, unacknowledged aerospace programs that quietly matured precisely as the Blackbird was being phased out of service. The structural transition of global intelligence gathering away from highly visible manned platforms toward autonomous, low-observable, and hypersonic systems represents one of the most tightly guarded evolutionary leaps in modern military history. When the defense establishment insisted that the sky was being left exclusively to orbital satellites, They were counting on a fundamental lack of public understanding regarding the limitations of space-based surveillance. In truth, the requirements of the post-Cold War world demanded an asset that could combine the unpredictable, on-demand deployment of an aircraft with the absolute invulnerability of a ghost. The legendary speed of the older platforms had become a double-edged sword. Traveling at over 3 times the speed of sound generated friction that heated the airframe to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit, creating an undeniable infrared signature that could be tracked by space-based warning sensors the moment the aircraft reached operational velocity. True modernization meant abandoning brute force speed in favor of absolute radar invisibility, an engineering paradigm shift that gave birth to a new generation of classified atmospheric platforms designed to operate completely undetected within the gaps of global air defense networks. The primary successor to this high-altitude mantle was not a single aircraft, but a bifurcated strategy dividing missions between deep penetration stealth drones and highly advanced hypersonic research platforms. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, specialized aviation enthusiasts and independent observers frequently documented unusual acoustic phenomena across the southwestern United States. Deep, rhythmic pulsing rumbles that differed fundamentally from the smooth roar of conventional jet turbines or the sharp crack of standard sonic booms. These signatures matched the theoretical characteristics of pulse detonation wave engines, a propulsion technology capable of pushing aircraft into the hypersonic regime beyond Mach 5 without requiring the massive, thermally vulnerable signatures of traditional afterburning turbojets. Concurrently, advancements in composite materials and radar-absorbent coatings allowed for the creation of high-altitude, long-endurance autonomous platforms that could loiter at 70,000 feet for days at a time rather than hours. While a manned aircraft required life support systems, heavy cockpit glass, and pilot ejection mechanisms that compromised its radar-evading geometry, an unmanned system could be molded into a perfectly seamless aerodynamic shape, drastically reducing its radar cross-section to the size of a marble while packing infinitely more sophisticated digital sensors into its internal bays. A critical piece of this puzzle lies in the development of highly covert, unacknowledged unmanned aerial vehicles, such as the rumored and later partially verified high-altitude stealth platforms developed by major defense contractors under complete classification wraps. These systems utilized advanced flying wing designs, completely devoid of vertical tail fins, which drastically minimized their detection profile against low-frequency early warning radars. Unlike the older titanium platforms that announced their presence to an entire continent via their immense engine heat and radar reflections, these newer autonomous ghosts could slip into contested airspace entirely unheralded, mapping electronic networks, intercepting communications, and capturing multispectral imagery without ever alerting the host nation. The public retirement of the iconic reconnaissance fleet provided the perfect political and strategic cover for these operations. Whenever foreign nations complained about mysterious radar anomalies or unidentified aerial objects moving through the upper atmosphere, the official response could confidently point to the empty hangars of the past, claiming that no such high-speed, high-altitude capability existed within the active inventory, thereby maintaining absolute plausible deniability while continuing to gather invaluable strategic intelligence. This transition also allowed the military apparatus to bypass the complex, restrictive bureaucracy associated with manned reconnaissance flights during delicate diplomatic standoffs. Flying a human pilot over a hostile or sovereign territory carries immense geopolitical risks. If the aircraft suffers a mechanical failure or encounters an advanced defensive system, the capture or loss of a pilot creates an immediate international crisis that can escalate out of control. By shifting the mission profile to autonomous, long-endurance stealth platforms, the geopolitical stakes were dramatically lowered. If an unmanned system is lost over foreign territory, it possesses no human face for a rival nation to display on global news networks, and its internal self-destruction mechanisms ensure that sensitive technology remains unrecoverable. The evolution was entirely logical. The old way relied on being too fast to catch, which became increasingly difficult as digital missile guidance systems matured, whereas the new way relied on being entirely invisible, ensuring that an adversary would never even pull the trigger because they never knew the target was there in the first place. Furthermore, the integration of artificial intelligence and advanced data links at the turn of the century completely transformed the nature of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. The legacy systems required physical film to be brought back to a base and manually developed or utilized early, bandwidth-limited digital transmissions that could be easily jammed or intercepted. The new generation of clandestine platforms functioned as airborne nodes within a massive, interconnected global data grid. They could process petabytes of sensor data in real time using onboard neural networks, automatically identifying anomalies, tracking mobile missile launchers, and relaying this critical data instantly to orbital satellites via secure, low probability of intercept laser communications. This level of network-centric warfare rendered the old paradigm of simply flying fast and taking a singular snapshot completely obsolete. The defense establishment did not give up high-altitude atmospheric reconnaissance. They simply perfected it, moving it away from the romanticized world of roaring engines and daring pilots into the silent, cold reality of autonomous digital dominance. The narrative that the sky was abandoned due to budgetary constraints or total reliance on space-based assets was a carefully maintained illusion, designed to keep foreign air defense engineers focused on fighting the previous war. While adversaries spent billions developing advanced missile systems capable of intercepting Mach 3 targets at high altitudes, the United States quietly pivoted to low-observable, ultra-quiet systems that rendered those expensive defensive networks utterly useless. The iconic black aircraft of the 20th century did not fade away because it was outmatched by the economy or by basic satellites. It stepped aside so that its invisible autonomous descendants could control the upper atmosphere without anyone ever knowing they were there. The true legacy of this transition is found not in the museums where the old platforms rest, but in the silent skies above modern conflict zones, where the descendants of the black budget revolution continue to operate in total, uninterrupted darkness.